All right, thank you, Raja, for waking up the room for me. Appreciate the joke. I will remember that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Dr. Chinnababu Garu and the Yashoda Hospitals for hosting me here, having me in Hyderabad. It is a genuine privilege to be in a room full of people building the future of care delivery. I've been looking forward to this. So now I know it's in the afternoon, after lunch. Let me just start somewhere unexpected. In America, right now, there's a physician who finished seeing patients hours ago, and it's still working. Not on patients, on notes, orders, clicks, codes. And American medicine, I know there are a few doctors in the room, has a name for it. It's called pajama time. The documentation that follows doctors home every night. And somewhere in this city, tomorrow morning, there will be a doctor in a government OPD facing a very different reality. A corridor full of waiting patients and roughly 2 minutes to spend with each. 2 minutes among the shortest consultations anywhere in the world. One physician drowning in time spent after the patient, another with almost no time with the patient. Two opposite symptoms on opposite sides of the world. Both of these physicians care deeply. They're doing the right things. And both are trapped inside systems designed around scarcity. And many of you have seen both realities, right? Sometimes in the same city, world-class medicine, an impossible scale, just a few kilometers apart. So here's the question I want to sit with for the next 25 minutes as we think through this. What if these are not two different problems? What if they are identical disease? Because neither of these is a technology problem. Neither of these is a healthcare problem. It is a design problem. The same design problem, and it comes from a design assumption so old and so deep that we stopped questioning it. Let's talk about it. So every institution represented in this room, every hospital, health system, insurance, ministry, company, was designed around one fundamental constraint. Intelligence is scarce, expertise is expensive, cognitive capacity is rationed. That assumption is now breaking. And here's what I have learned leading large transformations across multiple institutions. When the constraint your organization was built around starts to move, what follows is not a technology cycle. It's a redesign cycle. So let me start with a story from outside of healthcare. And a few folks today talked about electricity. Let me start on this, right? A story economists have told for 30 years, and one the tech world has rediscovered just this year. A lot of literature around it in the last year. It is the cleanest warning I know. So let me explain this picture. In the 1890s, far left, steam engine, factories ran on steam. One giant engine in the basement that you can see that's powering those big circles, and then the shafts and belts. That's how power was spread to the entire factory, right? The belts and the pulleys carrying the power to every machine. And the whole building layout, floors, workflows, was designed around that engine in the basement. Then electricity arrived around 1890-ish. Here's what most factory owners did. They took that giant steam engine at the basement, swapped it with one giant electric motor, same basement, same shaft, same belts. Productivity barely moved for nearly 30 years. Think about it. After electricity arrived, productivity barely moved for 30 years. What finally unlocked 30 years later, it was not a better motor. It was a question, it was a better question. Not how do we power our factory with electricity, but what should a factory look like if power can be anywhere? Small motors on every machine, so you can see a big difference there. The building has changed. Lane shafts gone, buildings redesigned around the flow of work, not the flow of power. The assembly line and the productivity explosion of the 20th century came from the redesign, not from the technology. And what I want to be honest today, I've watched the same movie play inside large institutions with different actors. I'll give an example. Years ago, I led a technology integration of a largest merger, $29 billion, Medco and Express Scripts, two pharmacy benefit giants merged. And we led the tech integration of it. And the easy answer was kind of wire the systems, digitize the seams, call it a victory, we should be okay. The tough question was redesigning the workflows, redesigning how we processed 1.5 billion prescriptions a year. And given the redesign, it was brutal, but given the redesign, that's how value was generated, right? The technology was never the obstacle, the redesign was the work. That experience is why the lesson of the factories is, for me, not history. It is the central argument for this talk. So technologies do not transform institutions, redesign does. And the technology is necessary, it is never sufficient. And most organizations today are repeating the basement motor mistake with AI. We're bolting a new engine onto an old building. You can already see the evidence, by the way. Over the past 2 years, AI has made millions of individuals extremely productive, dramatically productive. We all can see it, how we generate things and so on. I can guarantee you almost no institution has become more effective or valuable because of AI. Think about it. Where did all the productivity gains go? It went where it always goes when you swap the engine in the basement and keep the building the same, right? Because productive individuals do not make productive institutions. Redesigned ones do. All right, so let's talk about healthcare here. I'm going to explain that headline here. Institutions are frozen answers to old constraints. So why does a hospital look the way it looks? Think about it. We're in a hospital, very incredible, amazing hospital here. Hundreds of specialists, right? Why does it concentrate hundreds of specialists in one expensive building? Because expertise was scarce, so we centralized it, and we made patients travel to it. Why is the outpatient visit 15 minutes? Because the physician time is the scarcest resource in the system, so we ration it. Anything scarce is rationed. Why do we have referrals, chains, hierarchies, prior authorizations, escalation protocols? Honestly, each one is a queuing system, right? For scarce cognitive capacity and routing to the few people who are qualified to solve them. None of these are laws of nature, right? These are solutions, smart ones in their time, to the problem of scarce intelligence. And as I like to put it, institutions are frozen answers to old constraints, which hopefully raises the question this conference is convening to ask: what happens when that constraint itself, intelligence, begins to move? It's scalable. All right, let me be precise about what I'm claiming and what I'm not. I'm not claiming machines now possess wisdom, judgment, or anything resembling the experience of the clinicians in this room. They do not. What I'm claiming is more narrower and consequential. A growing share of cognitive work, reading, summarizing, drafting, triaging, all the administrative burden, monitoring, cross-referencing, no longer needs to be rationed. Work that once consumed the hours of scarce experts can now be replicated in parallel at marginal costs approaching zero. And history tells us what happens when a scarce input becomes abundant. 3 things every time. The economics invert. First, let's go back. When light was expensive, right? We designed life around daylight. When it became cheap, we redesigned everything, cities, work, leisure, around its abundance. When computation was expensive in the 60s, it lived in classrooms, mainframes, right, if you remember, and specialists with white coats and so on. But when it became cheap, it disappeared into all of your pockets, right? Abundant inputs do not just get used more, they get used differently for things that were previously unthinkable. So the most important applications of scalable intelligence in healthcare are likely things we currently do not know or do at all, because they were never worth the expert's time. Reviewing every chart, following with every patient, or giving attention to some patients that need more attention to, as we heard before, the high-risk few. Second, the work decomposes and recomposes. So today, a job is a bundle. A physician's day bundles diagnosis, documentation, coordination, counseling, compliance into one exhausted human. Scalable intelligence unbundles it. Workflows stop being chains of scarce experts, right, going through hierarchies, and they start become orchestrations. Humans and intelligent systems, which the previous talk Raja said, right, there's a presence in the room, each doing what they do best, with the human role shifting towards direction, judgment, and exception handling. And some of you are already piloting something called digital workforce, digital workers. We heard that. I would encourage you to take that term, phrase seriously, because it's not marketing, it's an organizational design question. Think about it. If part of your workforce can be replicated at will, at scale, what does an org chart even mean anymore? Right? So none of this, again, is about replacing clinicians. It's about taking the scarcest, most valuable resource in healthcare, clinical judgment, and stripping it away, everything that wastes it. Right? And third, this is the one most leaders often miss. Value migrates to what remains scarce. When intelligence becomes abundant, what becomes precious? Your judgment under uncertainty, your accountability, someone's name is on a decision, trust, the patient's willingness to be cared for, relationships, the quality of your data, the clarity of your goals. So the value migrates. So the scarce resource in your institution is about to change, and your institution is currently designed to optimize the old scarcity. So the strategic question changes. Most of folks I work with, leaders I work with, the first question, I'm an engineer, what do you automate? You give me a problem, you give me a workflow, I'll automate the heck out of it, right? So it's all about optimization. Right? That's what we're born to or wired to do, at least as engineers. So most organizations today are asking the same question, what can we automate? Where can I inject AI? Where can I introduce AI? What are the existing tasks that AI can do? And that is the steam engine question back then. You're replacing the steam engine with an electricity engine. You're leaving the building as is. It guarantees you a faster version of the institution you already have. The redesign question is different. If expert capacity were no longer a constraint, how would you deliver this mission from scratch? The question produces different answers, and nowhere are the stakes of that question higher than in the sector this conference is devoted to. All right, healthcare, in my mind, is going to be the first great stress test of institutional redesign, not because it is the easiest place to deploy intelligent systems, but because it is the place where the old constraint hurts the most. So consider the arithmetic of scarcity. We looked at numbers earlier that Raja shared, 1:1434. 10 million, that's the projected shortage of healthcare workers by 2030, concentrated in exactly the regions where the disease burden is the highest. Here in India, the challenge is as much as distribution as much as numbers. Specialists cluster in cities like this, while hundreds of millions live hours from the nearest one. And the 2-minute consultation is what rationing looks like when it runs out of the room. And in the world's richest systems, where doctors are comparatively plentiful, we're burning them out with cognitive and administrative load. Clinicians spending as much time on administrative and documentation work as on patients. So understand what that means. The scarce intelligence design of healthcare is already failing on its own terms. We do not have the luxury of treating institutional redesign as optional. Status quo is not stable. Now here's where the electricity lesson becomes a daily leadership choice. Let me make it concrete. Think about primary care. I picked this as an example. We talked about that, more slots, more patients, right? So the optimizer optimizes because a doctor can only see so many number of patients. Now appointment slots are the constraint. So everything, intake, scheduling, follow-up protocols, even the building itself was designed around rationing that scarce physician time. So the optimizer says, wonderful, intelligent systems will script the notes, handle the triage, ambient listening, you have an agent, and here we go, the steam engine swapped for a motor, right? The redesigner asks a different question. What if the appointment is no longer the center of care? If continuous monitoring, wearables, app-based tracking, all the intelligence systems flagging the problems between visits, the primary care touchpoint, then the physician's role itself is shifting. So you're redesigning the problem. It's not optimizing for slots for physician time, right? They are no longer the gatekeeper to managing that scarcity. So they become the escalation point for complexity and judgment. So think about this dichotomy on primary care example on optimizer versus redesigner, right? So it's not about the same care delivered faster. It is a different care model, and it changes what you staff for, how you organize work, and where care actually happens. And once you start asking questions, the redesign questions, they get bigger fast. What happens? Every patient gets a second opinion by default, because reviewing a case twice no longer costs anything. And here's the one I find most consequential, especially in India. What happens when expertise travels instead of patient traveling? Because in the past, expertise could not move, right? The specialist sat in the city, the patient took the bus. That constraint is dissolving. And with the local clinician's judgment in the loop, hopefully we can scale very fast the expertise to these rural areas. So another piece of the redesign is the incentive systems. Look, institutions were built around scarcity, as I said earlier, and every institution, and that's capitalism for you, have learned to extract value from that scarcity. So when a powerful technology arrives, the old incentive structure does not resist it. It actually recruits it to do the same things more efficiently. That's not unique to healthcare, unique to any country. That's just institutional behavior. And this is why I think India has a unique advantage, a structural advantage in this transition that may be underappreciated. You're not retrofitting incentives into institutions designed for scarcity. In many places, you're building new ones from the ground up. So UPI is a wonderful example. When India modernized payments, it did not digitize the checkbook. So there was no legacy barriers holding back. It did not optimize the branch banking model the West spent a century building. Right? Public digital infrastructure designed around what the technology made newly possible, and it leapfrogged an entire institutional generation. I believe a similar ambition now sits behind the Ayushman Bharat digital mission in health. Markets with less legacy infrastructure have less to unlearn, right? The countries and systems that could not afford the scarce intelligence model of healthcare may be the ones that design the abundant intelligence model first. The next great care delivery model may not be exported from the West to the rest. This may be reinvented here and exported outward. All right, I'm coming towards the end. Hope I'm challenging the status quo for many of you. It's also stressed in healthcare because this is the other half of the redesign. The downside in healthcare is measured in human lives. Right? So let me be equally direct about the other half of the redesign. In medicine, the unit of trust has always been a human being, a license, a name on the chart, a person who can be asked, why did you decide this? If we scale intelligence without scaling accountability, we will fail, and we will deserve to fail. So institutional redesign here is not just workflow redesign, it is governance redesign. Clarity about what decisions intelligence systems may inform and which a human must own. Monitoring systems in production the way we monitor patients continuously, not at the moment of approval. Preserving the human relationship at the center of care, because a patient's trust was never in the institution's knowledge. It was in being known. The institutions that get this right will not be the ones that move fastest. They will be the ones that make trust scale with intelligence. And they will set the standards for everyone else to inherit. All right, so let me bring this to the choice that sits with leaders in the room. And I left 3 questions for Monday morning, so something to think of, right? Because everything I've described is finally a leadership question, not a technology one. In every major transition, organizations sort into 2 groups. The first group adopts. They run pilots, they buy tools, they bolt on intelligence to their workflows, to tasks, onto existing structures, and there's huge efficiency gains. They'll harvest it. Real ones to measure, to optimize, and look for. And they slowly become the most optimized version of the obsolete design. 30 years of flat factory productivity from the steam engine example. Tells you how that story ends. The second group redesigns. They treat scalable intelligence not as a tool to procure, but as a constraint that has moved. And they re-ask the founding questions of their institution. Not where do we add AI, but what is the right shape of this organization, this model. I got the beep. This workforce, and now that intelligence is no longer the bottleneck. So here's the uncomfortable truth for the incumbents in this room. Your biggest risk may not be adopting AI badly. It may be successfully defending the care model optimized for yesterday's scarcity. Nobody gets fired for optimizing. That's exactly what makes this dangerous. So I left the 3 questions there. I'm not going to read them on the board in the interest of time. So let me end where I began. The constraint has moved. The 2 physicians, one still typing notes at 11 at night, one who will walk into an OPD tomorrow morning with 2 minutes per patient, and a corridor full of people waiting. Neither of them is failure as a person. The 2 signatures of the same design, a design built with the best intentions for a world where intelligence was scarce and had to be squeezed out of exhausted human beings, one ration slot at a time. That world is ending. The constraints our institutions were built around has begun to move, and that has happened only a handful of times in history. So the factories did it, finance did it right here in India, healthcare is next, and I'm really hopeful on what institutions here are going to build, because healthcare will not be transformed by institutions that adopt intelligence systems fastest. It will be transformed by institutions brave enough to redesign themselves with them. Thank you.